Why do you support Trump?
I support Trump for two main reasons, that being immigration and his stance on abortion.
Okay, what about immigration?
Um, I I appreciate the decrease in border encounters since he's become president,
Why?
and to decrease illegal immigration.
Why?
Because illegal immigration can bring it could lower wages for hardworking citizens.
Can't you also get rid of the decrease in wages by giving a pathway to citizenship for anyone who's in the country who's committed a violent crime or bad crime? Like,
Okay, I see what you're saying, but
you
why
would
should
also
we?
decrease illegal immigration that way as well.
Yeah, I don't dispute that. However, I also believe that we shouldn't reward people for for committing a crime, whether the crime be violent or not.
Okay. Well, okay. Really? So, I have a question. Do you know what app you're currently on right now?
Yes.
Did you know that currently under the law that this app is illegal?
What law is that?
It's illegal to use a TikTok ban that was put in place. That Donald Trump, the only reason we're not upholding is because he just essentially said don't enforce the law. So you're currently violating the law right now. Donald Trump's not enforcing the law when it comes to TikTok. So please explain to me why that's a good thing. While you're currently using
Okay,
the
well,
app.
I would see a difference in these two instances since illegal immigration can cause net detriments, and me using TikTok doesn't.
How so? What net detriments?
Illegal immigration, like I said before, could decrease wages.
How? Wait. Again, if it is the case that you provide a pathway to citizenship for anyone who's in the country who hasn't committed a violent crime or bad crime, well, then in that situation, it wouldn't decrease wages. You would agree, right? Because legal immigration doesn't decrease wages. The only reason it decreases wages is because you're advocating to deport people. So people are going to accept conditions of exploitation, right? Particularly within these areas, which will then lead to a decrease in wages, right? Because it is the case that they're willing to accept lower wages because they're being exploited in an effort specifically to not be deported, right? Because they want to be able to stay in the country. But if you give them a
Right.
pathway to citizenship, well, then they wouldn't be doing that. And it is the case that wages wouldn't be going down. So wages are only going down because you're creating conditions for exploitation.
Right, but there's a problem there because like I said before, I don't believe in mass amnesty because they violated the sovereignty of our country.
You don't care about violating the law.
I said sovereignty.
Wait, what do you mean? How is it violating the sovereignty of our country?
Yeah,
Yeah, explain to me how coming to the country undocumented is violating the sovereignty of our country.
because what does that say about us? We just let anyone in? Like,
Wait, I'm
it's like,
sorry.
who do they think
Do
they
you
are?
let tourists come to the country? They aren't citizens.
Yes, they're not here permanently.
So,
They're not living here. They're on here. They're on vacation.
we don't let anyone come to the country. If you haven't committed a violent crime or bad crime, well, then obviously you should be deported. Given it is the case that you're going to be put in a prison in another country. So there are certain standards that we have. We just shouldn't have like standards for no reason, I guess.
Standards for no reason.
Yeah,
Wait, what do you mean? We have a border and a.
I understand. What about that? Thank you for telling me you have a border. I really didn't know
No,
that.
I'm a little confused on what you're saying. What do you mean standards for no reason?
Yeah, like I don't think that we should just put a standard on limiting people from coming to the country without good reason, right? I don't think that you should, restrict people from coming to the country because they wear blue shirts. You know what I mean? Like that would be a ridiculous reason, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so then you obviously have to have good reason for the reasons you're going to restrict people from coming to the country. Like for example,
yeah.
if someone was trying to legally emigrate to the country, right, and they passed all of the necessary things to come to the country, but there's one thing that you have to look over in order to determine whether or not they should be allowed in the country, and it's the fact that they were held civilly liable for a woman. Would you let them legally enter the country? Yes or no?
I would not.
No. Okay, so do you think there should be harsher or stricter standards for becoming citizen comparative to becoming president?
Um, we can agree that Trump's character is
Well, I'm not,
deplorable.
not the question that I asked. I asked you, should there be harsher or stricter standards on
To
becoming a
become president,
citizen
yeah,
of the United States or becoming president?
to become president.
If it is the case that there should be harsher or stricter standards on becoming president, well, then if there's a standard applicable to becoming a citizen, well, then it should also be applicable to that of the presidency, correct?
Well, I wouldn't change the standards for immigration. If anything, I would make the president standards more strict.
Okay, so then I'll ask you this question. All right, if you wouldn't let someone enter the country legally if they were held civilly liable of a woman, why would you let them become president? Why would you vote for them? Why would you support them
Because
as
he
the
didn't
candidate?
illegally immigrate into the country.
Wait, that has nothing to do with it. We're talking. You said there should be harsher or stricter standards on who's allowed to legally enter the country, because we're talking about legal immigration. We didn't give you an example of someone who came to the country undocumented. We gave you an example of someone who's going through the legal process, and you're verifying whether or not they should be legally allowed into the country.
Oh, I missed that. You said legally?
Yeah, should someone held civilly liable of woman legally be allowed into the country?
I feel like we'd have to do a background check, like how long
Yeah,
ago
yeah.
did this happen?
The background check specifically indicated this. They were held civilly liable, right? I think in either 2022 or 2023. It was filed in 2019, and it happened in 1996.
Oh yeah, this sounds like the Trump case.
Well, I'm just no, just in those specific set of conditions. In that specific set of conditions, what should happen? Like, should they be allowed into the country? Yes or no?
I would definitely put some more consideration on it because that's a big gap in
You'd have to
the
think
time.
about it. You'd really have to think about this. You don't know whether or not they should be allowed into the country.
I'll give you an answer. Give me like 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Sounds very long already.
Okay, so I would look. I would look to see like what they did since like 1996. Like, are they
Really?
making a lot of
So
money?
tell me
Like,
what they specifically could have done to make up for the fact that they a woman and were held civilly liable of it. That insofar as that you would let them legally immigrate to the country. Please tell me.
they would have to have a pretty nice resume. Yeah, maybe they shouldn't be
Like
allowed.
what? Like what should be on the resume?
I'm kind of digging myself a pretty bad hole here.
Like on
I
the
should just
resume, they said they dated a 10-year-old girl in 10 years. On the resume, they bragged about walking into the changing rooms of girls in Miss Teen USA because they quote unquote owned the place to inspect them without their consent. Right? An 18-year-old came out, so there was 4 girls as young as 15 years old that were there when Donald Trump would barge in without their consent. You know, that on their resume, or like specifically the fact that, right, he said he would grab a woman by the without asking. He said he had sex in common with his daughter. Said he had a Howard Stern calling his daughter a piece of ass. You know, if that was on the resume specifically, would you let them legally enter the country?
no.
But you'd let them become president, and you'd vote for them, and you'd support them as the candidate, and you'd go on a live in front of 6,000 people, and you'd argue for them being in that position?
Comparative to Kamala Harris, yes,
Really?
because there's more to a president than their character.
Really? Okay, so then you don't require the same set of qualifications for becoming a citizen comparative to becoming president, right?
I guess so. Yeah, in this scenario.
So okay, so then you say that there should be harsher or stricter standards on becoming a citizen of the country through the context of immigration comparative to becoming president of the United States. So here's my question. Do you think babies that are allowed to legally enter the country are qualified to be president?
No, because they're not 35.
Why not?
Because they're not 35.
There are harsher or stricter standards on becoming president of the United States comparative to becoming a citizen.
There should be, but that wouldn't change my vote because I look at more than just that.
Oh, okay. If Donald Trump were held civilly liable of a child, would you still have voted for him?
A child? No,
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
No, you
I feel like
wouldn't.
that's
So to
that's
clarify, the only distinction between the cases were the victim's age. You're saying you would vote for him if the victim were above the age of 18, but if they were below the age of 18, then you wouldn't vote for him.
Do you agree with me that it's worse to a child than a grown person? Both are bad, but wouldn't you say that's worse?
Honestly, I think it's bad across the board. I don't think making a distinction between is like a good thing to do. I think that's a really weird thing to say. I think that you can say is equally disgusting and harmful across the board, right? And then in terms of this specifically, it should be at least under your view up to a threshold insofar as that you wouldn't want to support them. So the distinction that I'm saying is that regardless across the board, right, even if you do in your own head provide a distinction, that doesn't change whether or not the distinction would be relevant insofar as that you would say you'd support them in one scenario but not the other. It wouldn't be a
I see
relevant
what you're saying.
distinction.
I see what you're saying. But I kind of sometimes I find myself questioning the validity of the case.
The,
Uh,
the, wait, say that again.
Sometimes I question like how valid the case really was.
Okay, based upon what characteristics?
It was held in the state of New York, and they were given a poor selection of judges.
So are you saying any case held in New York should be thrown out?
No, that's not what I'm saying. When I'm saying you have like such an important political figure, I think it's like especially important to emphasize like there's no bias.
Okay. What was the judge's name?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay, well then how do you even know that they were biased?
Wait, am I wrong? Am I wrong that they were like a poor selection of judges?
No,
Correct.
I don't think there was a poor. I don't think Kaplan was a poor judge. Please explain to me one thing Kaplan did that was poor.
No,
Like
I'm
poor
just
behavior.
going on based off. I'm just going based off what I heard. I could be very wrong
So you got nothing?
about the judges. No, I just heard it was
Yeah,
a
you just heard it because you heard Trump conspiracy propaganda.
no, not conspiracies.
It is Trump conspiracy propaganda. It totally is.
Then why wasn't he held
Criminally
criminally
responsible
liable? Statute of limitations.
because of statute of limitations law that says that after a certain set of years you can't hold your abuser accountable in the context of a criminal court. Thousands of people who are abuse victims, right, held their abuser accountable in the context of civil courts because of this the extending of the statute of limitations through the Child Survivors Act and the Adult Survivors Act, because that specifically applied to civil cases and not criminal cases. Park, can you ask him if a person was an hour before turning 18 and another was an hour after, which does he think is worse?
It's a weird question. They're both really bad.
That's actually kind of like the point that I was making. Wait, actually, it's crazy. Wait, good point, Levy. You got him to say the exact same thing that I said, by the way. Right? That is the case that, like, why would you compare how bad it is the case that one from another? They're both so bad, right? That's kind of what I said, right? Okay, so then why can't you acknowledge my point then? Insofar as that, like, you wouldn't want to support Donald Trump then, because clearly your intuition isn't that you would still support Donald Trump if he were held civilly liable of a child. So clearly, why would you support Donald Trump if you, given that he's the case that he was held civilly liable of a woman?
I mean, I feel like as deplorable as that is, I felt like Kamala Harris would have been a worse option.
How
Like,
so? In what way? But wait, I just want to let you know, when he was held civilly liable of a child, the person he's running up against is Kamala Harris, and you still have the intuition that you wouldn't support Donald Trump, correct?
I don't think he would even be able to be allowed to run for president
No,
based off.
no. Given that this was the case, you would think that if it was the case that he wouldn't be allowed to run if he were held civilly liable of a woman. But well, we live in that timeline.
Yeah, that's a good point. Would I vote for him if he was held of doing it to a child?
Say it again.
Uh, I'm sorry, you asked me if I would vote for him if he was held civilly liable of raping a child.
Yeah.
I would have a
Again,
very
yeah.
hard time doing
Versus
that.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I think I would have a very hard time doing that. I don't think I would be able to.
Okay. So again, what's the relevant distinction between the victim being an adult and the victim being a child that means that you would support him in one scenario but not the other?
Like, I understand like the distinction you're trying to make, and I respond to this by saying that I look more than just character. I look beyond.
I understand, but like you're not willing to say that when it comes to the victim being a child for some reason.
I don't know. It just doesn't.
That's not a relevant distinction between the two scenarios. That means in one scenario you'd support him but not in the other. So either you have to say you support him in both scenarios or in neither scenarios.
I see what you're saying.
It's because there's not a relevant difference, and I think it's very intuitively clear to you now that like you shouldn't support him given this set of conditions. Like doesn't this example make it very clear to you that you shouldn't support him in this scenario?
Yes, in this scenario, yes.
Yeah, so then like that should also apply to the scenario in which is in reality that he was held civilly liable of E. Jean Carroll. Okay, it looks like you have a lot to think about, so I appreciate you coming up.
Yeah, you